Welcome back. I am John P. Today we are going to be talking about these two watch brands that are either going to explode in terms of desirability and popularity, or they may die a very slow death. Now, these brands are going to be Ulysse Nardin and Girard-Perregaux. Now, if you follow this channel, you know that I like both of these brands. I think UN has been a little bit displaced in terms of the watches they're offering recently, with some exceptions, but I do think they're putting out a great product. And if you watch this channel once again, you know that I'm a big advocate of the Girard-Perregaux watches. I think they deliver so much quality. And I mean, it's a brand literally from the 1700s that really doesn't have too many gaps in its history. And I think where you can buy these watches, it provides some of the best value in horology today for those that are willing to kind of get off the beaten path in terms of, you know, the Rolex AP, now Vacheron, Patek Philippe kind of area, and still get a lot of the quality, if not sometimes a little bit more than you would see dollar for dollar, right? So these are brands that I really like and I want to see them succeed. So I'm going to touch on that in just a second, what's happening with them. But guys, please do not forget to thumbs up, like, and subscribe. I really do appreciate it. And you can find me on Instagram, TheRealJohnP. And do not forget to check out DelReyWatch.com, where we may have some Girard-Perregaux and UN in stock. But the reality is both of these brands just seem to be doing a little bit better than they used to. So we are selling, especially the GPs, pretty quickly. Now, what is the news? What's going on with Girard-Perregaux and UN? If you're not familiar, basically these two brands were owned by a company or a holding company called the Soin Group, which is part of Kering Group, which owns many luxury brands, including Gucci, right? Powerhouse luxury brands. They own these brands, and it's very common, right? You have Richemont, you have Swatch Group, you have LVMH, you have these holding companies that own all these luxury brands, and they can leverage different departments and cross-branding and things like that to build bigger luxury houses and fashion houses and utilize a lot of the same production materials and processes and so on and so forth. And so that's how it works. And Kering Group is a company that own them. Now, recently, these two brands, it was announced that there's a management buyout going out, right? So the CEO that was running the companies decided to, you know, I suppose, pool together some funds and purchase the brands from Kering Group, and Kering Group obviously divesting themselves, which seems like totally from horology altogether. I'm sure there's still some licensing and things where they may have some Gucci watches, and I'm not sure how they have that structured entirely. I think we'll see that on the investor reports probably that will be released, because it's a publicly traded company in outside of the United States. So you can see some of these things that are detailed in their investor reports. So this is pretty big, right? I know for us as collectors, sometimes it's a little bit focused on the watches, but if we look at what's going on with the brands, this can kind of give us some foreshadowing or enough interest to show some excitement and to look out for this brand into the future. Now, Girard-Perregaux is doing a great job. They came out with the new Laureato a handful of years ago that really struck with me, and the quality is there. I know so many friends and collectors that have been putting this watch in their collection, and it makes sense because it really is a high quality watch and they do a great job. But the reality is, particularly with Girard-Perregaux, they just hit a bit of a rut, right? They're producing a lot of the same styles of watches that others have been producing out there. They had a very long stretch of time where truly they were almost seemingly defunct. I'll say that Girard-Perregaux, in terms of sales volume, it's at least estimated or rumored by Watch Pro, a trade journal, that they sell less than $26 million in watches per year. Now, I know it's saying $26 million, like, oh wow, that's a large number. But in the watch world, it's very low. I mean, they don't make the top 40 most sold watch brands based on sales. So in terms of the sales numbers, and keep in mind they do sell expensive watches, so the sales volume is truly pretty low in terms of watches out there, and I think that makes a lot of sense why, you know, you can see a management buyout happen here compared to something like a Rolex, where there would just be really no ability for that to happen without essentially a big luxury group buying them. And that's what we see is, you know, now this luxury group pulling out and not putting the resources behind these two brands. And I think that it's a pivotal moment for UN and GP, because one, unfortunately, they could suffer without the backing of a very large luxury holding house, right? Without this luxury holding house of companies and corporations pushing them along, and without the resources behind them and the access to different capital markets, I don't know that they really can take too much of a hit going forward without suffering seriously, having to raise more capital, and at a certain point it just not be worth the investors and the management that are taking it on. Now, I'm not privy to all of the financials and the exact sales for them, but I can say just generally in terms of watch brands, that's what could happen. But on the flip side, without these constraints and without the company being publicly traded and without having to do certain things and meet certain criteria of this holding house, the management could take this watch brand or these two brands in a more kind of micro brand strategy, right? Where they can go to market quicker with their pieces. They can kind of innovate and do more exciting things outside of that traditional old world mentality that somehow has grown and taken a hold of many brands in the watch industry, right? You see a lot of brands that kind of want to behave and act like micro brands because micro brands kind of just do it so quick and fast, and they can respond to the market in a much quicker and more efficient and directed way for what we want as watch collectors. And so it could go that direction where Girard-Perregaux and UN start producing smaller batches of watches and more in tune with exactly what watch collectors want, right? Certain dial colors, certain models. They can use different tactics that micro brands use, right? They can put out a couple of watches, send them out to different people on YouTube or Instagram, gain feedback on these watches, and choose to produce the watches in larger batches or not, right? There's many brands that will kind of trickle out images or send samples to YouTube and Instagram people, and then see what the feedback is, and then decide if they're going to produce a lot of these watches, and if not, how to make the watches better and change it iteratively, but do it quicker. And they can do that without some of the constraints that come with being a publicly traded company, as well as having to conform to these kind of rules that these big fashion houses oftentimes place on these luxury goods brands. And so personally, I think it's very exciting to see this happening. I think that in the coming years, we'll see what happens with Girard-Perregaux and UN. I mean, that's pretty clear. But I am really rooting for both of the brands. I'd say that 12, 13, 14 years ago when I started getting into watch collecting, both of these brands really just struck interesting places with me because they were unique. It was something different, and I could see the value in the watchmaking, in the horology, and just what they did. And it wasn't every day that you would see that watch on someone else's wrist. So as an enthusiast, it would kind of get me excited to see that aspect and component. And so truly, I am very excited to see what the management buyout brings for UN and Girard-Perregaux. But at the very least, we may see some of these available for sale at delraywatch.com when perhaps some of the inventory gets pushed out into the market to make way for new product models and catalogs. That's kind of where watches end up out there on the gray market. But what do you guys think? Do you think this matters at all? Is it maybe a testament to the times of what's going on in the watch industry? Do you think it's maybe Kering Group was right to proverbially pull the plug, or do you think there's something more? What do you think about Girard-Perregaux and Ulysse Nardin? I would love to see it and hear it in the comments below. Guys, please do not forget to check out delraywatch.com and sinclairstraps.com. Thanks, guys. You've been chatting with John P.